Hello and welcome to Active Defense Scenarios, a quarterly exercise that promotes security posture. Today, I'll be your presenter. My name is Robert Moody. Let's dive right in. Agenda. So what are we going to be talking about today? So I have you for approximately the next hour. I will provide you a disclaimer about the content in this presentation. I'll give you an introduction to who I am as your speaker, walk you through the threats all around us, talk about what is active defense, the phases of active defense, and diving into those phases, we'll talk a little bit about mission selection and planning, threat hunting and establishing a baseline, security control validation testing, security control hardening, validation, retesting, and lastly, reporting and lessons learned. Then I'll open it up over to you all to ask any questions you have, and to the best of my ability, I'll give you some answers. So disclaimer, all content contained in this presentation are solely the views of the presenter and do not represent the opinions, belief, experiences, policy, or operating agreements of any of the organizations the speaker currently works for or has worked for in the past. Now that we've knocked that one out of the way, my name is Robert Moody. I've worked in intelligence and incident response, digital forensics, cybersecurity in general for almost a decade now. I lead the cyber threat intelligence team at the Home Depot. We're charged with defending the threat landscape, identifying threats for all of North America and our subsidiaries. I have the CISM certification, CISA certification, CDPSE certification, CRTIA certification, a master's degree, and an EMBA. My background really was in defending critical infrastructure, including manufacturing, banking, finance, telecommunication, retail, and energy. So threats all around us. I know personally, I feel whenever I turn on the news, hop on a bleeping computer, or even just watch mainstream things like MSNBC or CNN, you start to see more and more on cyber attacks. Breaking news, this cute cartoon really says it perfectly. It's cyber attacks are everywhere. Whether it's hafnium, the US government blaming China and its allies for targeting exchange servers, and then that hack going after the vulnerabilities and really being one of the worst cyber attacks we've had on US soil in a long time, whether it's Accenture being hit by the Lockbit gang using their new Lockbit 2.0 ransomware, Ransom EXX, and APT targeting hotels, or hackers breaching the Colonial Pipeline. I know the gas price on my truck went up significantly because of that. And this is just part of the story of what's going on. Cyber attacks are big money, big business. Organizations worldwide are having issues to try to defend it. These actor groups or advanced persistent threats, cyber adversaries, however you want to call them, they are getting more advanced. They're learning new tactics and techniques, and it's hard for the defense sector to keep up with them and to change and adapt to their novel techniques and procedures. Bears, spiders, and kittens, oh my. There's vendors out there putting fancy names on the different actors and adversary groups. These tie out to different things. If you're using CrowdStrike lingo, bears would be Russian or Eastern European linked adversaries. Spiders would be your organized crime or financially motivated groups, and kittens would be your groups coming out of Iran. It really is become such a big business around naming these actors and adversaries. It doesn't help the end consumer. It doesn't help the cyber defense. It doesn't help those of us who work in a SOC and try to really improve our situation by understanding these groups and actors and how they behave and what to do. That's where active defense comes in. But what is active defense? So I love this graphic. This was really fun to put together. Think of the pyramid of pain here. It's a commonly used architecture model for describing both from a SOC perspective and an intel perspective and how to deal with either hunting for IOCs created by actors or adversary groups or stopping actors or adversary groups. And I will get into that in a second. But what is an active defense mission? An active defense mission is an intelligence-led cross-team exercise. I'm going to highlight that again. Cross-team exercise that evaluates an organization's readiness for a cyber attack by a specific adversary. In the mission, cybersecurity teams leverage the intelligence gained on an adversary to harden security controls and enrich detective capabilities. This is done to cause the most pain to the adversary, i.e. the bear trap there, if they were to attack an organization. So what does this mission test? This is really interesting. An organization's ability to identify and disrupt their TTPs and their tools. That's why we're going after the top of the pyramid of pain. So we're looking at it from a defense perspective. If we can stop an actor from using their TTPs and tools, that will cause them the most pain because those are the most difficult to change or alter in the way that they operate. We're going to test the efficacy of our security tools. We're going to make improvements or updates to the security detection response logic of those tools. We're going to be better at detecting the tools and tactics of these actor groups. We're going to measure the pre and post state of the organization for one specific threat. This is an excellent way for you to be able to provide to your leadership team, hey, I need this or that, and here's a defined reason why with metrics. And then the willingness and ability of the organization's security teams to cooperate and innovate. It's not very often, unless you're working a real incident where everyone's hair is on fire, it feels like the walls are burning down, that a security team will come together, work together, and really try to improve and fix something. And this is going to be fixed, again, in a quarterly time frame. We're going to be able to do something and show real response and real benefit to the organization within a quarter. So let's talk a little about the phases of active defense. I'll throw some timelines out here. The Spartan-looking guy in the middle of this, this mission cycle. So really the mission begins with the selection and planning. Then you threat hunt and establish a baseline. You do your security control validation and testing. You do your security control hardening, and then you retest. So you want to know how well did your hardening work. And then you have to report. You have to make your lessons learned. So for the mission selection and planning phase, we really look at it from a 3 to 4 week period. Again, you have a more mature intel team, or if you're working in, I guess, a cross-functional way like a fusion cell, you may be able to reduce this time to maybe a week or two. You may have some missions on hand. Some more of the more mature teams that I've worked with, there's a good repository of missions that you would want to test. And as you start doing this and start building this capability, that gets a lot quicker because you know how to do it. You have templates. It flies. So then you go into threat hunting and establishing a baseline. This is where you look for indicators of compromise across your environment. That takes about 1 to 2 weeks, again, depending on the maturity and availability of your blue team or endpoint and detection and response team. Then you look at it from security control validation testing. You're at the whim of your purple or red team at this point. So again, more mature team, more personnel, dedicated resources to this, 2 to 3 weeks. And then the caveat here is the scope of the assessment. The more tools that you want to test and see how well their security controls work, the longer it's going to take. It's just going to be more infrastructure that the purple or red team has to build out, and they have to learn more nuances to the way in which they can respond to and build out their attack plan or methodology based off of the intel you give them. And then you add security control hardening, 3 to 4 weeks. There's also a QA process built into that. So hopefully 1 to 2 weeks of actually building the new controls. There's some really interesting and novel ways of building that into your validation testing. Again, depending on how skilled your purple and red team are, if they have the defensive, I guess, wherewithal or know-how, then they can also build some of your controls in there and add that to the security control hardening piece. And then it's just QA and testing for your technology owners. But if the technology owners are the ones building it, it may take a little bit longer. And then validation testing again. So this is your retest. This is where you test the same mission exactly, same commands, input, same actor-based emulation on your controls after they were hardened. That should be pretty quick. All the infrastructure and tie-in should be built out. Everything should just be as simple as entering in the strokes to the keyboard or clicking an automated attack. Then you got to do reporting and lessons learned. This takes a little bit of time. Again, the more mature your unit is, if you have templates, it goes a lot faster. So mission planning, mission selection and planning. This is probably one of the most fun parts of this for me as an Intel guy. How do we choose the best topic? You need to have leadership and the committee buy-in. I recommend having more than one person deciding the missions. You take in stock from your experts within your security team because they may be following things that you're not as a leader. Again, lead by committee with this one. I recommend keeping the group small. You don't want too many chefs in the kitchen, but you do want good people in there. If you're working in that fusion cell style, do invite the other parties involved. So if you're working with your blue team, your red team, invite them into the room, ask them what they think is important for the environment. They may have insights that you don't have as an Intel guy or gal. All right, so once you have that, one of the best things that I've done working in this active defense style missions is to incorporate a revolving mission lead. What does that mean exactly? That means that a member on my team would switch as mission lead each quarter. That gives an opportunity for growth. That gives an opportunity for changes and new insights into the process that you wouldn't get by keeping the same leader and keeping it stagnant. It's really good. It really builds a level of dynamic nature to the missions. Okay, so now we know how to do that, but what makes a good mission topic? So it needs to be specific. You can do an adversary-based active defense mission. You can have a campaign-based active defense mission, but it also needs to be relevant. It needs to be tied to your threat landscape. It needs to be relevant for your organization, your suppliers, your peers. These are all good examples. Supply chain attacks are something on the rise, so I would recommend looking into that if you wanted to roll this out. But again, if you're just starting out, look at your organization, talk to your blue team about the incidents they're responding to, and who is attacking you, and then build your missions off of that. Next, is there enough relevant data? Can you build a threat model about what's out there? Is there enough to test against your security controls? Are you able to go out and do open source research, or if you have the resources, the closed sources that you have, do you have enough data to build out an understanding of how these actors work, what techniques they're using? Is there a way that you can translate it in a common lexicon? Do you have analysis on their malware? These are all things that you need to orient your actor emulation testing and then really validate your security controls against it. Again, read the news. The reason I throw this slide back up here is that these are all examples of things your C-levels are talking about. This is another possible good source for identifying a mission. They're all very specific. They have actors tied to them. The news loves putting a name to the quote-unquote bad guy here. So these are all opportunities to test these types of attacks. And it keeps your CXOs or your senior leadership happy because you're looking at the cutting edge of attacks and what's going on in the threat landscape. I recommend threat modeling. And this is a very complex slide. So what I would recommend getting out of this, you need to understand your business context, your system context, your threat context, and your risk context of your organization. You need to know yourself. And then by knowing yourself, you know who could potentially attack you, what their means are. Again, talk with the other security teams to understand if there is one group or another focusing on you. And then you build the profile. You understand how they attack. But the key to threat modeling is building a complex multi-staged scenario. And you target your threat, you target or threaten your critical assets, your crown jewels. That's what the mission should be looking at. That's who you should model your attacks, your active defense around, those groups. And then with that information and that understanding, those threat-centric use cases, you can start to build better detection and use that to feed your intelligence lifecycle and collect more data on actor groups or adversaries that you do have gaps for. But in short, build a multi-stage complex attack chain that you want to test. I recommend using the MITRE attack framework, building a MITRE attack threat model. There's really good resources out there. Cybrary and MITRE attack have built together the MAD training and certification line. The training's free. Go out there, have one of your team members learn it, or if you're the individual contributor working on this, go out and learn this. It is an invaluable skill in today's really intel or defense response mechanism. So you want to, what are the benefits of using active defense and MITRE ATT&CK together? Building one of these threat models that allows you to prioritize the testing of and remediation of in the wild observed attack techniques. Everything in MITRE has been observed in the wild. And when it's tied out to a specific adversary, those techniques have been observed, there's data behind it, you know that the actor or adversary that you're looking at has used these in the past. It also looks great. When you're presenting to your leadership team, having a heat map like this, providing information on which techniques and in which phase of the attack chain or life cycle, kill chain, whatever word you want to use for it, this is very helpful for them to understand what's important to us and why is it important. It also provides a common lexicon that can be shared across your teams. So your red team will be able to understand this, and your blue team will be able to understand this. Your network security teams will be able to understand the way in which these actors groups use these techniques because it's defined. There is a set layout. It's evolving. It's getting more enriched. Highly recommend using this to convey thoughts and concepts and really your active defense mission across teams. Again, like I said, they're building new campaigns and attack methodologies so that it can be better tested. It's constantly evolving. They're adding new techniques and sub-techniques. There's 14, I think now, tactics, like 185 or 187 techniques, and then 367 sub-techniques. That's massive. That goes back to the complex nature of the threat models you're trying to build. It also maps back to NIST SP 853. This provides potential security and privacy controls and audit potential for your organization to go just beyond this attacker-centric view. You can go back and work with this model and talk policy, if that's something you want to do. So then you have to craft the narrative and mission scope. I'm going to use the example of Wizard Spider. Wizard Spider is a sophisticated Eastern European attributed cybercrime group. They create a sophisticated arsenal of tools. They perform big game hunting. They're very active. They're behind TrickBot, Ryuk, and the Conti ransomware. So they don't openly advertise their tools like a lot of other groups. On underground forums, they work with a small subset of well-vetted operators that they then take a piece of whatever they do when they implement the Ryuk or Conti ransomware. Here's a timeline of the ransomwares and different malware, trojans, backdoors, spams. You name it, this group has been building and actively working on. So this is kind of a timeline of the tools they've used, at least from the research that I was able to put together. They're interesting for a mission scenario. All right, so let's take this back to MITRE ATT&CK. That's the threat model that I recommended using. So I want to understand a little bit more about the way this group does their scripting and their execution of malware. I want to understand the way that they modify system processes. For exfiltration, I want to understand how they use command and control channels and also alternate protocols. I want to understand the remote services as the exploitation of those remote services, and then the use of external remote services. But let's take this a bit deeper. So deep diving into the way the actor groups, the threat models that are out there for them, tied back to MITRE. So they use this, I'm not going to go through each of these, but let's grab the first one. So let's talk about their use of PowerShell. So this ties back to the MITRE ATT&CK technique T1059, which is command and scripting interpreter. The sub-technique they use is 001, which is PowerShell. So Wizard Spider has been observed using macros to execute PowerShell scripts to download malware on victim machines. It has also used PowerShell to execute commands and move laterally through a victim network. This is interesting to test if you want to know your organization's ability to defend against something like this. Expanding on that, I also want to look at T1543, which is create or modify system processes. And I want to look at 003 as a sub-technique, which is using Windows command shell to do that. So Wizard Spider has been observed using command.exe to execute commands on a victim's machine. And I have a few more techniques, and this is how I go through. This is what I recommend your teams doing, is working through to putting together a list of these TTPs and understanding, again, tied back to MITRE so that you can have more of a conversation with other teams so that it's a common language that you're speaking to them, and also a common way to reflect your remediations once you identify where your gaps are. And I'll show you that in a little bit. So, keeping with planning your mission. It can get out of hand. There's a lot of different teams involved. What I recommend doing is, at the beginning of your mission, deciding the stakeholders you want involved. Some key stakeholders that I've worked with in the past in these missions have included blue teams, of course your intel team, your endpoint detection and response team, maybe they own your endpoint solution, your network security team, your NOC, if that's a thing that you have in your organization, your firewall team, your cloud team, your data loss prevention team, your digital forensics and incident response team, vulnerability management, and red team. That's a pretty diverse group of security teams, but you can build them all into your mission plan. So what is the deliverable that you want after this first phase? It feels like forever ago we've already been talking about how to build this out, but again, this is just one piece to the puzzle here. We're looking at having a active defense mission plan. You want a document that states what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, who you're testing against, and which controls that you want to see the efficacy for. You need to have a kickoff meeting. You need to make everyone aware, including your leadership, make sure that they have their sign off in there, but you need to make sure everyone's aware of what the mission is, why you're doing it, and have them on board. That's your chance to sell this and show how awesome of a mission that you're going to be able to implement. Another thing, again, this comes to the manager and me, I want to know the metrics on the time to plan this mission. How long did it take? Is there points for improvement? Was there dissension in the group? I want to understand why the mission took how long it did to plan it, good, bad, or indifferent, just so you can always constantly improve. So threat hunting and establishing a baseline. This is the second phase of active defense. So threat hunting overview, why are you doing this? And what are you doing? So you're collecting a set of indicators associated with the adversary or campaign. Again, we were talking about wizard spider, so we'll get into an example for that in a second, but we're looking to collect the indicators of compromise associated with the adversary or campaign detailed in your mission plan. But why are we doing this? Well, we want to know whether an adversary or campaign that we're testing against is currently affecting our organization. We want to know if any of the IOCs detected are showing up in any of our logs. And the reason we want to do this is so that we can establish this baseline, have an understanding that we have a clean slate we're working off, so any of the red team or purple team's testing of our security controls is just that. It's a test created by the red or purple team, and we have that true understanding and belief and trust in their results, saying we don't think it's anything else, there's no false positives, or in this case it would be true positives if the actor adversary were attacking in the environment. The following teams would be involved in this phase, so it would be your blue team, your endpoint detection and response team. Any of the teams that are actually going out and hunting for the IOCs, that's who would fall into here. And again, your intel team in this methodology would be the ones driving the whole phase, so they're in every step in the process. All right, this is a fun one. How do we collect indicators? There's a lot of different ways to do that. One example is using a tool like Reported Future. There's open source providers like ThreatMiner, Malpedia is another good one. Going out and looking at vendor reports that are released, trying to find any indicators that are mentioned in active and relevant campaigns to the group that you're looking at. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Again, by the maturity of your team, you should have some processes there to do ad hoc indicator hunting or enrichment. So once you have those indicators, you've gone out and hunted for them, the blue team would then perform threat hunting to identify host-related IOCs for the wizard spider adversary. We're going to look for those tactics that we had. We try to associate IOCs to them. But again, we want to know if there's any wizard spider activity or attributed activity to wizard spider in our environment. We're going to use the EDR team to look for some of the command line activity, again, for Wizard Spider's command and control, persistence, and lateral movement techniques. Also, a really interesting project I recommend you all checking out is the Sigma project. This is scene-based rules for detection. So I normally recommend my teams to go out and reach out to the blue team and say, hey, I know you're working on your seam here. These are the Sigma rules that can be used to hunt Wizard Spider's technique. So maybe later on, if your seam's not one of the technologies you're testing, this could be a good way as a follow-up or recommendation that you have later on. So what do you get out of this phase of the mission? You understand the activity baseline. If you come back 0, you're in really good shape to know that this adversary is not in your environment and any tests being done and anything observed from this point forward would be your purple or red team. And then conversely, if you get the opposite, then you have a bigger issue, pause the mission, escalate, and deep dive into what is causing that activity so you can either know whether you're under attack or you can treat them as a false positive and move forward and use that as part of the data going forward. You'll have metrics on the IOCs identified. How good is your team at identifying usable IOCs for the blue or EDR teams? This can help you improve your intelligence collecting process. And again, metrics. We're gonna take some time to understand how long did it take for us to hunt for the IOCs involved? Were there any hiccups? Was there any issues with our technologies? Now we're getting into the interesting stuff. So let's talk security control validation testing. So what is security control validation testing? This is the phase of the active defense mission that involves a purple or red team utilizing the intelligence provided by the CTI team, the MITRE attack threat model, and command/processes leveraged by the adversary detailed in the mission plan. This is to be done so that you can emulate a realistic attack against the organization's defense control. So you have your little castle here, you know where your openings are, but is this really the state of your defense? That's what you want to know. Do you want to know how well your pre-mission controls are detecting, alerting, and blocking the techniques of the adversary of interest? Again, our scenarios around Wizard Spider, so how good are our security controls in detecting Wizard Spider activity? Alerting us on that, is something going to be built out? Do we have the proper use cases? Is our endpoint really going to fire and let us know when something's happening? Or is it going to block the techniques that we observe? This is the point of this part of the mission. Again, who's involved? Your red or purple team or whoever's conducting your test, and then your intel team. So going with this Wizard Spider example, we as the intel team are going to have the red team or purple team use the MITRE attack threat model and then the techniques we've provided them to run a test and see either automated or manual the efficacy of our tools. So are we going to, again, detect, alert, or block what we see from the activity that the purple or red team are emulating Wizard Spider for? Purple team is going to give us a current state analysis. So we're going to understand what the security controls that are within scope are able to do. And they're going to brief us, and they're going to walk us through their assessment results and recommendations. All right, so phase delivery here. What are we giving back to us as the intel team? What do we expect to receive from our purple or red team? Well, we initially had the assessment results. What is fired, what hasn't? What improvement recommendations do they make? They're experts in the way attackers work. How could we better enrich our defensive controls based off of their perspective? Metrics on the efficacy of the controls. How good are they against the MITRE attack framework? I'll show you that in a second. But we also want to know, how much time did it take to test the controls? Where can we find improvements for the purple and red team as part of this mission? This is an example. This is, again, a graphic display of the Wizard Spider techniques. So we put their MITRE attack tactic on the left-hand side. We put their MITRE attack technique in the middle to explain what we're testing. You can even throw another column in here that would be the specific commands run by your red or purple team. And then you have your pre-mission endpoint detection rate. So how well did your endpoint detection tool or sensor or really your security control work against the technique that you chose and the mission is based around. In this example, we did very poorly as an organization, but that's not good or bad. That means that there's room for improvement, and by the end of the mission, we'll be way better off. So security control hardening. All right. Let's see our little penguin friend here. He's going to help us fix the issues that we just saw. We didn't do very good on our control validation testing. So now we come to the hardening phase. So we look at this and say, based on the test that we received, how can we improve the design and implementation of our detection and response logic? This needs to be the guiding force behind this, needs to be our purple or red team and the results we got from the previous phase. There is nothing better of a conversation starter than taking that purple team report or red team report, walking it over to your security control or technology owners and saying, look, this is what they did. Be an open book here. Give them the answers to the test. This is what they did, and this is what the tool did. We need your help. And you make it about needing their help to fix the situation. This isn't that they did their job improperly. This is us as an organization working together. It's that collaboration. It's that communication that we need to have as an organization to be able to build a better defense in depth and stop actors from being able to attack us. Again, taking that collaborative approach, we're going to work with our partners who own the technology, and then they're going to use this information to harden things such as your email, network, endpoint security controls, and try to shore up the gaps identified during that validation testing. Who's involved? I highly recommend having the red or purple team debrief those technology owners personally. Something may be lost in conversation with you as the Intel team trying to regurgitate their report findings. Bring them in, have them brief the technology owners on what they saw and their recommendations for improving it. All right, our lovely friends at Wizard Spider. So let's use this example again. We're going to talk through the current state. We're going to use that report to share and brief the technology owners of the improvements to the alerting logic that we need. Maybe you're going to have your email hygiene team ensure the rules block the known phishing attachments for Wizard Spider. Maybe you're going to have your EDR team test new alerting and response logic to ensure the endpoint sensors will properly fire when Wizard Spider activity is occurring. Maybe you'll have your NOC team, if they own the IDS, set some new rules to detect and respond against Wizard Spider command and control infrastructure or communications. What do we get at the end of this mission phase? Well, we're going to get a list of security control improvements. We're going to take the metrics around how long did it take to improve our security controls. You need this list of improvements so you can call that out in your after action report or your debrief or recap, however you want to call your end final report on the mission. You need those controls and you need to document throughout the process. Start early, start often, and it makes your job at the end easier. You don't have to go and find people and say, hey, look, I know you're finished with your part of the mission, but can you get me those results again? So this is an example of how to report across your hardening result. So again, here's our MITRE attack tactic, here's our technique, and then you put down, again, just focusing on your endpoint detection and potentially your IDS. We say where the rules fired and where things were created. So our endpoint was really bad, so we created new rules across the board. For IDS, maybe the two that we had success on, we didn't need to create new rules for, so we ended up creating 4, not 6. All right, security control validation retesting. All right, it's very similar to the test. It should be a little bit easier to execute as well. You see our capsule got a little bit bigger. We added more security controls. We're a little more confident in the way that our defenses are set up against this adversary. So we then would reach out to our purple or red team and say, hey, can you reassess our security controls? We took your answer key, went back, revised our tests, let us know how we did. Then they retest the environment. Your purple or red team will come back and say, similarly to what we showed previously, was the control alerted on? Was the control blocked? Was it detected? How did the specific technology respond to our attack? Parties involved, red team, purple team, and then CTI team. Again, using the wizard spider example, CTI team requests with the wizard spider techniques be retested. There is a current state assessment of the organization's security controls. The current state now is post remediation, so you can have that before and after look into it. So you have your validation assessment results, any improvement recommendations from here. You're constantly seeking improvement, and then the metrics on the security controls. This looks a little bit better now. This would make me feel as a leader more confident and comfortable. I can sleep better. My insomnia is cured. I don't think we're just going to be absolutely overrun with spiders here. So we have our tactics on the left-hand side. We have our technique after that. We have our pre-mission and post-mission results side by side. The reason we have it side by side is that it's a powerful graphic to show the work and collaboration the teams that were involved have committed to this project and have done to fix everything involved. So we've gone from 0 to hero in the span of a quarter. So reporting and lessons learned. This is all what it comes down to. This is how you show the value in the work that you've done. This is how you sell the story of what you're doing, and this is how you do more and get better buy-in from leadership and promote security awareness across the organization. So there's some keys to reporting that I would like to call out. Different styles, different organizations with those caveats. Some organizations may be more receptive to other reporting styles, but these are very general. I highly recommend listening to them and seeing where you can take something and bring it back to your organization and really just try to improve the way that you report the data. So have an executive summary, try to keep it to 1 page. I've run into teams that have tried to just overwhelm non-technical audience with just so much data that they don't know how to consume it. The average executive doesn't have enough time to read a 50-page report. They'll look at the first page and try to distill as much information as they can down. Make their job easy. Put together an executive summary, have lots of charts, short paragraphs explaining exactly what the charts are and the success of the mission. I'm going to repeat this again. Use graphics. You can represent several paragraphs in a single chart. Do it. Keep it simple where possible. The report is not an opportunity to show how technical you or your team are. Yes, you're dealing with very technical things. You're talking about the way adversaries are compromising organizations, the nuances to their malware. You understand that. The technical stakeholders understand that. The consumers of your reports don't necessarily need to understand that unless this is a technical report, and that was the purpose of what you're doing. Have a style guide and follow it to ensure the document is congruent throughout. I've run into this a lot in my career. When you start having different size fonts, not everything is uniform, you will get a very picky leader who just will disregard your work because you haven't followed a consistent flow or format. Sometimes organizations have this. I recommend having a person on your team responsible for designing the style guide, following proper procedure for building that out. And it's important to stick to it. If you've built something out and this is the understanding, then you use it. If you want to change it, you hold a meeting, you work with your team to say, look, this is what we want to do. So you don't have those one-offs coming out because not everyone's aware of the changes to the style guide. I highly recommend seeking feedback on the drafts that you share before you share it out. Highlight the success and failures as well. So when you go through, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. You need to call out what has happened that was negative, because this is an opportunity for improvement. Just because something failed doesn't mean that it was the team or the mission's fault. You need to understand the root cause of the issues and where you can find improvement. No matter what success or failure, you can find improvement and a way to get better. And that's the end of the day what these active defense missions are about, is getting better at security. You need to include recognition and share the credit with all members involved. This is super important. These missions are a lot of work. It's a quarter of your time. There's a lot of benefit to doing them. Make sure everyone's recognized. It'll ensure buy-in for future missions. Continuing, remember your target audience. So if it's a technical audience, you can include technical information. If it's an executive audience, remember that as well. I would recommend tailoring versions of your report to the different audiences. So maybe your executives don't want to read a report. Maybe they want PowerPoint slides. It's not about you and the way you want to report things. It's about the way that your consumers want to consume the information. So tailor it that way. When reporting gaps or issues at the end of the mission, make sure to provide a recommendation for fixing the issue or filling the gap. Some advice I got a long time ago when I was a consultant was you want to leave your client with a headache. You don't want to leave them with a migraine and no aspirin. It's very rudimentary, but it persists here. If you're going to call out issues at the end of your mission or something that's going on with your organization and why you can't detect or protect against an adversary, then you need to provide some way to fix it. Even if the organization doesn't go with your suggestion, you need to provide a way for the organization to fix it, to fill the gap, to make the organization better. That's your responsibility as a security team. So good recommendations are underpinned by industry-accepted methodologies or frameworks. Earlier I called out MITRE ATT&CK, NIST. I would also call out DEFEND here. Try to tie your recommendations to industry standard and accepted frameworks. It makes things easier when conveying. It makes sure that you get buy-in from making those remediations. Very rarely will you get someone to argue against an approved framework like NIST. Always hold a post-mission debrief with the parties who participated. I'm going to say it one more time. Hold your post-mission debrief. I know how busy internal security teams are. I live it on a day-to-day basis. Even if it has to be 2 or 3 weeks out, take the opportunity to celebrate the success, learn from the failures, and just get everybody in the room. You'll hear things that you weren't expecting. You don't know what everyone's thinking, so getting an opportunity for everyone to share their thoughts and ideas for improvement will make your next mission way, way better. So when you're looking at lessons learned in an after action report or, again, your recap. So what happened? What was supposed to happen? What can we learn about it? Why was there a difference? You want to segment your observed facts and the evidence that you have on why things failed with opinions. Everybody's going to have an opinion when something fails. You do take stock in that as well, but you separate the two. These are the facts of the situation. This is what happened. This is what the beliefs and opinions are. This is how we suggest to improve it. Here are the facts on improvement, and here are the suggestions or opinions on improvement. Question and answer. Again, thank you all so much for coming out and listening to my presentation today. Happy to take any questions you have, and thank you all very, very much.